Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Catalyze Your Self. I am Gayatri, and today we are exploring a word that has been showing up everywhere lately: catalyst. In recent years, catalyst has become a trendy label. We see it on resumes, we see it in social media posts, we see it in mission statements. We see statements like, be a catalyst for change. I am a catalyst for innovation. We are a catalyst for transformation. True, it's very inspiring language. But when a word is used everywhere, it's easy for us to become numb to what it truly means. The word starts to sound like branding, and we lose touch with the weight it actually carries. The truth is, a catalyst is not just a person with a passion or a moment of disruption. The word, as we know, comes from chemistry, where a catalyst is a substance that speeds up a reaction without being consumed in the process. It does not force the reaction. It doesn't become the reaction. It simply lowers the barrier so the reaction can happen more easily, but only if the conditions already were just right. In human terms, a catalyst does not create change out of nothing. We don't walk into a system, a team, or our own lives and make change happen by the sheer force of will. What we can do, and what true catalysts do, is accelerate the movement that's already possible when readiness is present. And this is exactly why this podcast that I am sharing with each of you is called Catalyze Your Self. When I chose the name, it wasn't because catalyst sounded powerful. It was because I believe the most important and sustainable change starts from within us. The world often tells us to look for catalysts outside of ourselves, a leader, a mentor, a breakthrough event. And while those can matter, real transformation begins when we learn how to lower our own barriers to change for our growth. Catalyzing yourself means sparking your own movement towards integration. It is recognizing the moment when your self-awareness tells you something needs to shift, when your self-inspiration reminds you why it matters, when your self-regulation keeps you steady through discomfort, and when your self-expression makes the change visible and actionable. And all of it is held in the ecosystem of self-reflection. So you keep growing without losing alignment. And when we do that, when we catalyze ourselves first, we become a living example of what is possible for others. We can serve as catalysts in our relationships, in our work, in our communities, not because we are forcing change, but because we are embodying it. So today, we are going to explore what it means to be a true catalyst for change. We will talk about the nature of a catalyst, from its chemistry roots to its role in human growth. We will unpack what readiness really is, why it is the invisible prerequisite for any change to take root, and how the SIRE model is the engine behind lasting transformation. And of course, we will look at how halt, rise, and shift can bring us back to center when the process gets messy. Because being a catalyst isn't about chasing a title or a trend. It is about knowing when and how to spark movement that lasts in ourselves first, and then in the systems we are part of. So we talked about how the nature of a catalyst was first noted in the world of chemistry. So let's stay there for a minute. In chemistry, a catalyst does not show up to dominate the reaction. It does not take credit for the outcome. It simply creates the conditions for the reaction to happen more easily by lowering the energy barrier that is in the way. And when we translate that into human beings, whether it is our personal growth, our relationships, or the organizations we are part of, the principle is exactly the same. A true catalyst does not make people change. A catalyst reduces the resistance that's keeping the change from happening. It lowers the barriers, lowers the fear, lowers the doubt, and lowers the opportunity for habits to keep repeating, lowers the opportunity for unspoken assumptions to keep popping up. So movement towards integration becomes possible. The key is that a catalyst is most effective when the raw materials for change is already present. In chemistry, the reaction cannot happen unless the elements that are reactants are ready to interact. In human terms, that readiness looks like enough awareness to see a need for change, enough inspiration to want something different, enough regulation to stay steady through the disruption, and enough expression to name the truth and take a step forward. That is why a catalyst is not the same as a controller. In human systems, trying to force change without readiness does not accelerate transformation. It often creates pushback, burnout, or in some cases, surface level compliance without real integration. So the change does not stick. A healthy catalyst operates from presence, not pressure. It influences by embodying the shift, by holding steady in its own integration, and by creating openings where others can step into and change at their own pace. And this is where the SIRE models becomes more than a personal growth framework. It becomes the architecture of catalysis itself. Self-awareness identifies the gap or misalignment. Self-inspiration fuels the why that sustains momentum. Self-regulation keeps the process from collapsing when discomfort comes into play. And self-expression mobilizes others through clarity and truth. And let us not forget self-reflection, the ecosystem that holds it all, that ensures that the shift is not temporary, it's integrated. When these elements are active, the energy barrier within us to change lowers. Conversations become possible that were perhaps previously avoided. New behaviors feel less risky. Choices start to align with values rather than habits. And this is the heart of being a human catalyst. We don't just create change for others. We model and enable it in a way that allows the change to belong to them. And that is how it lasts. And here's the thing about catalysts, but regardless of whether it's in chemistry or in human life, they only work when the conditions are right. You can have the most powerful catalyst in the world, but if the reactants aren't ready to combine, nothing's going to happen. In human terms, this is what I call the prerequisite readiness factor. And readiness is often misunderstood. We confuse it with desire, I want this to change, or with motivation, I'm fired up to start. But wanting and readiness are not the same thing. Readiness is the point where the conditions in a person or a system are steady enough, open enough, aligned enough to move towards integration without collapsing under the weight of the change. When we look through the SIRE model, readiness becomes much easier to see. With self-awareness, we can clearly see the gap between where things are now and where they need to be. We are not pretending that the status quo is fine. With self-inspiration, we are anchored to a why, as to why it matters to us, and not just responding to outside pressure. With self-regulation, we can handle the discomfort and uncertainty without shutting down or spiraling out. And with self-expression, we are willing to actually call out the truth, ask questions, and participate in a dialogue, in a discourse. And within the ecosystem of self-reflection, we are learning from past patterns and adjusting rather than repeating them. When these elements are present, even if they're still developing, readiness is emerging. A catalyst can step in and accelerate the movement because the system is ready and has the stability and willingness to engage. When these elements are missing, we are in low readiness. And in low readiness, a catalyst's role is not to force ignition. It is simply to create conditions to prepare, to help build awareness, safety, and stability, so that when the spark comes, it can take root without burning out. And we must also recognize this. Readiness exists on a spectrum. We could have low readiness, resistance, avoidance, or denial. We could have emerging readiness, where awareness is still forming, but stability or safety still needs strengthening. We could have active readiness, where most of the elements of SIRE are already present. The environment can hold the tension of change. Or we could be in a state of sustained readiness, where we can move through the change cycles without losing alignment. And here is why these matter for us as catalysts. When we ignore readiness, we can spend enormous energy sparking movement that fizzles out, or worse, creates a backlash. But when we match our actions to the level of readiness, preparing when readiness is low, igniting it when it's emerging, accelerating it when it's active, we work with the system instead of against it. When readiness is low, it can be tempting to push change away. We see something that needs to shift, we feel the urgency, and we want to light that match now. But here's the risk. If we do not watch out for readiness, when the system is not ready and we try to force that change, what we become are false catalysts. A false catalyst can look like a breakthrough in the moment, but it does not have the conditions to take root. It is movement without integration. And instead of accelerating real change, it can create a whiplash that leaves people more resistant than ever before. False catalysts can show up in many different ways. It could be urgency-driven sparks or high-energy pushes born out of frustration or crises. They get attention, but they fade as soon as that combination of scenarios pass on, as soon as the urgency passes. It could be symbolic wins with quick fixes on or surface level changes that make it look like progress, but it doesn't address the deeper misalignment. It could be a very specific person-dependent change where the movement that exists only exists as long as that certain leader, certain influencer, or certain champion is present. And when they leave, the change dissolves. On the surface, These moments can feel inspiring. They can even give us that dopamine hit, that rush of something is finally happening. But without readiness, without self-awareness, self-inspiration, self-regulation, self-expression, and the ecosystem of self-reflection active in the system, the momentum will not be able to sustain itself. And the unfortunate part is also that the consequences of false catalysts go way beyond disappointment. They can reinforce cynicism. This could lead to a perspective of, see, change never lasts. They can burn out the very people most committed to progression. They can harden resistance, making the next catalyst job much harder. As catalysts, our responsibility is not just to create movement, but to create movement that can take hold. That means reading readiness accurately and resisting the pull to ignite for the sake of activity. Sometimes our greatest impact comes not from being the match, but from preparing the conditions. So when the match is struck by us or someone else, it lights something that will keep burning. When we think about what makes a catalyst effective, it is not just their passion or their ability to inspire in a moment. It is the structure they bring to how they move and how they help others move. And this is where the SIRE model is more than just a personal growth framework. It is the internal engine that makes catalysis possible. The catalyst's ability to see clearly what's happening now with their self-awareness, the patterns, the misalignments, the opportunities, without getting lost in assumptions or noise. This clarity is what identifies where the barriers are. The catalyst's ability to connect the change to a compelling why that others can feel in their self-inspiration. It's what gives that spark, meaning beyond urgency, anchoring it in values and vision, so the momentum does not fade when discomfort sets in. The catalyst's capacity to hold steady in the discomfort of transition with their self-regulation matters. A catalyst without regulation may be able to start something, but they will not be able to sustain it because they will burn out, escalate conflict, or lose alignment under pressure. The way a catalyst makes the movement visible and accessible through their self-expression, where they're able to communicate with clarity and authenticity so others know what's changing, why it matters, and how to engage, is what makes the difference. And the ongoing process of checking alignment, learning from each step, and adjusting as needed by the catalysts through their self-reflection is critical. This ensures that this shift integrates rather than staying as some sort of a temporary surge. When all of these 5 elements are active in a catalyst and in the environment, the barriers to change lowers. The process feels less like it's being pushed and more like it's being invited. And that's when people are more likely to step in and own their part of the movement. And when we drift, because change processes are messy, this is where halt, rise, and shift can keep the engine running in alignment. Halt, as we know, is the first recognition when we've left our center, noting our hesitation, our avoidance, our lack, our tiredness, or exhaustion. And with rise, our recentering starts happening through recognition, intention, senses, and evaluation. And finally, with shift, where we start embodying alignment again with stop, highlight, integrate, flow, and trust. A catalyst who uses halt, rise, and shift isn't just reacting to challenges, they're actively returning to themselves and the system to a state where the change can keep moving forward without losing its integrity. And this is why the SIRE model is the difference between a spark that fades and a movement that lasts. It's not about being the loudest force in the room. It's about holding the structure that makes it possible for others to step in and carry the change with us and without us. And we must remember this. Even the most grounded, skillful catalyst cannot create lasting change alone. Going right back to chemistry, the catalyst works because the conditions are ready. They're already present that allow for the elements to react. And for us humans, it's the same principle. The environment has to be able to hold the change and its impacts. What this means is readiness is not individual, it is collective. It is the culture, it's the relationships, it's the structures and the shared norms that either support or resist movement. A catalyst can lower the barriers, but if the environment is too unstable, too unsafe, too rigid, the change will struggle to take root. And that is why being an effective catalyst is knowing when our role is to ignite and when it is to simply prepare the conditions. In low readiness environment, the most impactful thing we can do might not be push for big moves right away. It could be building trust. It could be strengthening communication. It could be helping people develop their own self-awareness, self-inspiration, self-regulation, and self-expression. That is groundwork. That is preparation that makes that system capable of holding more significant shifts later. When readiness is emerging or active, the catalyst can accelerate change because the environment has the capacity to engage. The conditions are stable enough for people to participate without collapsing into defensiveness and chaos. And here's the shift that happens when the environment reaches sustained readiness. The catalyst is no longer the focal point. The change becomes self-sustaining because the culture itself has internalized the capacity to move forward, integration, and conscious leadership. This is where leadership culture truly evolves, when the ability to catalyze is distributed and everyone in the system is capable of sparking and sustaining change from wherever they are. That is when the work we've done as catalysts becomes embedded in the DNA of the group, and our influence can ripple far beyond our initial direct involvement. And this brings me to a very important point. One of the biggest risks for anyone who steps into the role of a catalyst is over-owning the change. We see the potential, we see the urgency, and before we know it, we take on the entire responsibility of moving the process forward. But here's what we must recognize. A healthy catalyst does not carry the whole change. A healthy catalyst sparks it, holds the space for it, and models what it looks like to move in alignment. And they allow others to take ownership of their parts. This matters for two reasons. One, sustainability. If the change depends entirely on us, it is not really change. It is just dependence. The moment we step away, the movement risks losing its momentum. 2, integration. People integrate change more deeply when they have played an active role in shaping it, when they have played an active role by owning it, not when it is carried to them fully formed. As a healthy catalyst, we must keep this in mind. We must read the readiness before acting, knowing whether it is time to ignite, accelerate, or simply prepare. We must stay regulated so we don't mistake urgency for effectiveness. We must let go of control. Once the spark is lit, we must trust others to move their own timing in their own way. We must protect our energy so we can sustain influence over time rather than burning out in one burst of effort. Sometimes being a healthy catalyst means doing less than what we want to in the moment. It means holding back from over-explaining, over-persuading, or over-managing so the people we are influencing have space to step in and own the process. And sometimes it means accepting that our role was simply to begin, to plant that seed, to shift the conversation, to open that door, knowing the growth will happen long after we are gone, long after we've left the room. This is what allows us to catalyze without losing ourselves in the process. It's what keeps the work aligned, sustainable, and able to ripple outward in ways we might never fully see. And that's the way it is meant to be. As we close today's conversation, let us remember that being a catalyst is not about having the loudest voice or the boldest action. It is about knowing when and how to spark movement that can last, movement that can stay aligned, movement that integrates into the system and continues even when we are no longer present. A true catalyst does not create change out of nothing. We accelerate what is already possible when readiness is present. And readiness is built on the same elements that anchor the SIRE model: self-awareness, self-inspiration, self-regulation, self-expression, all held in the ecosystem of self-reflection. When those elements are active, the energy barrier to change lowers, possibilities open, opportunities are abundant, conversations shift, and action feels doable. And when readiness is low, our role as catalysts is not to ignite. It is simply to prepare conditions, to help build those capacities so that when the moment comes, the spark can take hold. So here's what I would love for us to reflect on this week. Where are we already serving as a catalyst? It might be in our family, it could be in our workplace, our community, or even within ourselves. Notice the moments when our presence or action lowers the barriers for change. What is the readiness level of the person, a group, or a system that we are trying to influence? Are they low readiness, emerging readiness, active, or sustained readiness? And what does that mean for how we show up? Are we using halt, rise, and shift to return to our center when things get messy? When we catalyze ourselves first, when we lead from our own integration, we become an example for the change we are hoping to see. We don't just push for movement, we invite it. And that's the kind of catalyst that leaves that lasting mark, one that continues to ripple long after the spark was lit. Thank you. Thank you for spending time with me today. I am Gayatri, and I'm grateful for the shared commitment we are building here to lead ourselves and each other with clarity, courage, and conscious presence. And until next time, keep noticing, keep practicing, and keep choosing to catalyze yourself first. so you can be the catalyst for change that truly lasts for everything and everybody in your life.